Hello, my name is Alex Davis, and here I will be presenting to you my research presentation. The title is Streaming Music as Environment, Exploring the Impact of Streaming Technologies as a Cool Medium of Low Definition. Over time, the way we hear and listen to music has changed consistently and drastically. The landscape of performance audio, which began with strictly live performance, has witnessed transitions from radio to television, vinyl record to 8-track, and cassette to compact disc. However, within the last 20 years, we've seen even more change. With the emergence of the internet, we saw digital files become the primary use of accessing music. Furthermore, within the last decade or so, we saw those digital files take an even different turn as streaming began to make itself known as the new norm. This project is an exploration of the impact of streaming technologies with emphasis on streaming as the environment. This paper is based on four main principles: participation, production, reach, and the economic aspect, which we refer to as Streamonomics. To perform this analysis, we will utilize the works of, but not limited to, Marshall McLuhan's Understanding Media. Participation, consumption, and distribution. McLuhan defines a cool medium as one that is high in participation or completion by audience. 1964, page 39. When compared with older technologies used for listening to music like vinyl, cassette, or compact disc, it can seem as though more participation was required with the former. Records had to be flipped and the needle had to be properly placed. Tapes had to be rewound and compact discs had to be huffed on and wiped off. Let's also not forget that each of these mediums usually had cases or coverings that they remained in when they weren't being used. Participation was also required in relation to sound and the actual action of listening. The silences, scratches, and skips made listening all that more of an engaging activity. However, streaming music isn't all that different from these mediums. Participation is required through means of needing and navigating the internet, downloading an application, or installing a platform, setting up an account, and searching for the music you want to hear. Participation can also be gauged upon the environment one listens in. If you are in the car, you have to connect your device via Bluetooth, auxiliary cord, or USB connection, and if you are in the gym or on a run, chances are you must connect your device to a pair of headphones. Participation through streaming can be seen in other ways as well. For one, with the exception of platforms like YouTube, SoundCloud, and Pandora, you are usually required to make an account. Furthermore, you are given the option to subscribe in several different capacities. Once in the application you are choosing to use, there is the option to listen to an already curated playlist, create your own playlist, and organize your own library. You are even able to like songs. I put air quotes around like. Pause songs, and skip songs. In a recent study conducted by HubSpot.com, it was found that streaming tops every other form of music consumption. The researchers examined two main questions: how many people use streaming music services, and how do people primarily consume music? Zantal Wiener, 2019. In the consensus style survey, 2,500 people across the UK, US, and Canada were asked three questions as follows. Do you use a streaming music service like Spotify or Pandora? Select all that apply. Which of the following best describes the primary way you consume music? And how do you consume music? Select all that apply. The fact that in the first question, only 54% of respondents claimed they used a streaming service like Spotify or Pandora begs the claim that maybe not everyone has the same definition of what qualifies as a streaming service. Support can be found for this in the following two questions, which, although different, are very similar. When combined, streaming services topped every other medium within each question. While this report was based on a slim 2,500 people, I'm willing to bet it holds true for much larger populations as well. Streaming services tend to be very diverse as far as who can participate. Not only are listeners participating, but so are artists. So what happens when consumption changes? You guessed right. Distribution changes as well. Artists are no longer forced to abide by the traditional album cycle of saving up all of their music until it's done and releasing it all at one time as an album. Deal 2019. There aren't too many artists that have the luxury of leaving the public eye for 2 years, coming back trying to make a splash like artists were once able to. Deal 2019. Charlie XCX is a great example of someone who has defied this old corporate record label based norm. She has released her music however and whenever she wants to. Deal 2019. She wouldn't be able to do this without the streaming platforms we are discussing. Furthermore, they have helped her grow and maintain her audience while still creating. The invasion of the mechanical world by the instantaneous character of electricity, it is a way of thinking as much as it is a way of doing. McLuhan, 1964, 461-62. participation from the perspective of the distributor can be said to be more active nowadays than it ever was. Whether record label, independent artist, or distribution, publishing and licensing platforms like TuneCore and CD Baby, participation is much different than it once was. Before distribution happens, production has to occur, which we will discuss further in the next section. However, once a song or album is completely produced, it then has to be uploaded. Being uploaded requires an additional step in which the file is compressed or converted to the specific file type deemed appropriate per platform. Other items to take into account are that you are required to upload song or album artwork with your creation. Furthermore, this branches out to a whole other area of participation in order to begin distributing your music. You or someone else has to design the artwork and upload the correct file type to the streaming platform as well. Once uploaded, information like the year, title, and artist must be entered before submitting. As far as being an independent artist with a minor fan base, wouldn't there be more to this process? Of course. Now you must email, tweet, post a link to your music wherever you can. It wasn't like this with the tangible forms of music we once used, where labels did most of the work as far as shipping CDs to retailers for fans to purchase. Now the artist is required to do more work than ever. Participation has not only become different, but it has become more. Streaming, much like social media, has bridged the gap between fans and artists. As easy as an artist can upload their music to a streaming platform, a fan can just as easily listen to the music uploaded. There is more of a connection formed as the relationship becomes more obtainable on both sides. Production and sound. The argument can be made that streaming music is even more cool of a medium than the technologies discussed in the prior section. Taking a look at how the music we listen to through these services is produced is completely different than how it was when vinyl was the primary way of listening to music. There is an abundance of different software and hardware, live instruments being played versus live instrument sounds being loaded, mixing and mastering, vocal effects, production techniques, and compression of digital files. Studio setups vary more than ever today as well. An artist may record in their home studio, tour bus, their hotel, or a traditional recording studio. The phrase traditional recording studio should actually be up for debate in 2020. This differs from the past when it was necessary for every artist to utilize a traditional recording studio. Furthermore, this requires more participation from the listener to decipher what kind of sound and production they are taking in. It requires the listener to fill in the blanks and attempt to understand exactly what the artist, producer, and engineer of a specific song are trying to do. The argument can be made that the audio we hear through these streaming services is more pristine than ever, so it requires less participation in picking out the quirks or abnormalities. However, the argument can also be made that vinyl, for example, gave us such a raw and authentic sound of the times, presenting our ears with everything there was to hear. Perhaps the music produced today is so engineered that it is not natural anymore. Perhaps more work is being done by the listener in 2020 than in 1964. While royalty payouts from streams to artists may be slim, slim is better than none. For artists to receive royalties and chart tallies from their streams, a single song of theirs must be played consecutively for at least 30 seconds. Hogan 2017. Furthermore, this is why the beginning of a song is extremely important. Lil Pump's Gucci Gang is a great example of this. The song is very short in length, coming in at under 2 minutes. Furthermore, it also follows a trend across streaming platforms where the format is hook, verse, hook. This ends up being the way that people are now producing, where the idea is that the listener is constantly just clicking play on a new song because they aren't buying it. Glasser and Aremus, 2018. This concept of a song needing to be streamed consecutively for 30 seconds in order for the artist to receive royalties is very similar to that of radio, where for a song to be registered as played with broadcast music incorporated, it must be aired across a station for at least 60 seconds consecutively. It must also be the sole sound broadcast at the time it is aired. BMI.com 2020. We see here how important the concept of phonocentrism really is. These purposely sculpted records for audience engagement are what we would call reverse engineering. This is exactly what McLuhan means when he states that as artists began a century ago to construct their works backward, starting with the effect, so now with industry and planning. McLuhan 1964, 468. While the product is indeed important, for you don't have an audience without a product to serve them, more significant than the product itself is the process by which the product is curated. We trust the words of McLuhan once again as he claims, instead of the product, the process. 1964, page 427 to 28. If the individual creating music acts on how they want their music to be heard and consumed while creating the music, there should realistically be a better chance of their production being consumed in that intended way when it is finished. The consumer becomes the producer. McLuhan, 1964, 462. What we see here in this process is the consumer being the reason for the way the piece of music is created. Roland Barthes has pointed out that any interpretation of a text has to move outside the text so as to refer to the reader. The text has no meaning until someone reads it, and to make it make sense, it must be interpreted, which is to say, related to the reader's world. Which is not to say read whimsically or with no reference to the writer's world. Page 162. The music is made to be heard and heard by a specific audience. Therefore, seeking that audience's interpretation and validation of what it is they're consuming. As said by Bourdieu, pronunciation bad, I know, taste classifies and it classifies the classifier. 1965. The way in which the listener has chosen or been forced to listen to music in current time not only says a lot about them, but also their lifestyle. For someone always on the go, switching from car to foot to bike to train or bus, on their way to and from home, gym, class, or work, streaming is completely suitable. They don't have to search their device's library for music. They simply type in what they want to hear on the streaming platform. Energy and production now tend to fuse with information and learning. McLuhan, 1964, 463. Streaming as an environment has undoubtedly mobilized our mobile devices in more ways than one. There isn't much that we cannot accomplish from our phones. Not only has streaming given us more information and ability through our devices, but it has also provided an opportunity to learn how to maneuver these technologies. All of this begs the question, what about the process of creating the environment of streaming? I'm pretty sure these platforms were also constructed backwards with consideration for the user. Let's take a step back in the direction of how and when we use these technologies. We primarily stream music in our commutes or while we're engaging in some sort of physical activity, whether it be exercising, cleaning the house, or socializing. What does this say about our focus and attention during the time we stream? Are we fully engaged? Is the music more important at the time, or is it the action that we're engaging in? Most technology produces an amplification that is quite explicit in its separation of the senses. McLuhan, 1964, page 441. There is something to be said here about attention spans in present day versus attention spans 50 years ago. Reach and extension. Reach in relation to streaming as an environment can be investigated in two different ways. One is the potential audience available to an artist through utilizing a streaming platform. The other is streaming as an environment and how it is an extension of the participants. We'll begin with reach as the potential audience available to an artist through utilizing a streaming platform. As an artist, making yourself available on a platform or multiple platforms increases your chances of being noticed or listened to. The audience that these streaming platforms afford the artists is quite extensive. Monthly active users worldwide per platform are as follows. YouTube, 1.5 billion. NetEase, 400 million. SoundCloud, 175 million. Spotify, 170 million. iHeartRadio, 100 million. Pandora, 74 million. Ghana, 50 million. Apple Music, 50 million. Angami, 33 million. Deezer, 14 million. McIntyre, 2018. If you do the math, that is well over 2 billion potential listeners. The custom-built supplants the mass-produced. McLuhan, 1964, 465. These platforms are providing different experiences to different groups of individuals, including, but not limited to, listeners, artists, and companies. The reach that these platforms provide to each individual, no matter their objective, is like no other, proving to be a chance for maximum exposure or familiarity. Artists also strive to get placement on popular playlists within these streaming platforms. If the artist can get placement on a widely consumed playlist within the streaming platform, they further open themselves to an audience that would have possibly never become familiar with them. However, we see more than that of the artist focusing on the area of playlists as well. Apple Music is re-equipping its app with improvements including the introduction of night mode and curated playlists to target specific groups. Kumar 2020. This further hints at the area of participation per different approaches toward utilization of these streaming platforms. So what about streaming as an extension of the participant? For the listener, the platform becomes an extension of their individual tastes. Libraries are made with collections of favorite songs. Data is comprised of what individuals listen to and listen to the most. Furthermore, the platforms go as far as constructing their own recommendations for the individual based on what they have already and usually press play on. The platform also keeps a log of recently played songs for the user to reflect on. Listeners can curate their own playlists, thus shaping their identity and certain compilations for certain intentions within their lives. What we are seeing is that the streaming platform is an extension of the listener's identity and preference. For the artist, the platform becomes an extension of their identity in a different way. The artist is shaping their identity through the music they release via stream. However, the artist is not only shaping their identity for themselves, they are also shaping their perceived identity for their audience. The perception of an artist is very subjective, as it is all up for interpretation dependent upon the individual listener and that listener's taste. For the record label, the streaming platform serves as an extension of their roster and who they represent. Their catalog is an extension of the genres of music they publish and support. The numbers their artists accumulate via each streaming platform also extends the record label as successful or not so successful when compared with the numbers of other labels. What we are seeing is the aspect of streaming music becoming an extension of identity, perception, preference, and success. If the arrow is an extension of the hand and the arm, the rifle is an extension of the eye and teeth. McLuhan, 1964, 451-52. This McLuhan quote is ironically somewhat more literal than our statement. Nonetheless, the extension of streaming is beyond the physical. Streamonomics. Streaming primarily affects four main entities: the artist, the label, the platform, and the listener. The impact to the artist is dependent upon the notoriety of the artist. For lesser known, underground, starving artists, streaming provides a platform to gain fans and make money, even if not that much. For artists like Jay-Z or Beyonce, streaming impedes and potentially decreases their digital album sales. According to a 2014 report by Nielsen SoundScan, sales of digital songs dropped by more than 12%. Furthermore, digital album sales were down almost 10%, Gans 2015. They have not since rebounded. Music and tech journalist David Turner claims that the $10 subscription to the platform is where the payout is established. Furthermore, 30% of that $10 goes to the streaming platform, while the other 70% of that $10 goes to the record label. Glasser and Oremus, 2018. The artist then gets paid per stream depending on what kind of deal they have structured with their label. If the artist is signed to a major label, chances are they are getting 12 to 15% for every stream accumulated, whereas if the artist is signed to an indie label, they can potentially acquire up to 50% per stream. The amount paid per stream is dependent upon the streaming platform. Apple Music pays 0.0007 cents per individual stream. Spotify is reported to be about half of that, and Tidal pays out significantly more than either one of those, but is still essentially fractions of pennies. YouTube pays even less due to all of the revenue being generated stemming from the overall advertising side and not simply just the music side of it. Glasser and Oremus, 2018. With all of that said, for the artist to make a single dollar, it requires them to achieve close to 10,000 streams. It can be said that neither the Jay-Z's nor the unsigned hypes of music culture are benefiting financially from this streaming model. However, the labels are actually benefiting greatly due to their large catalogs of music, which keeps streams coming in non-stop. In general, the platform is not losing at all. The only hit the streaming platform takes is from other competing platforms. In the same report from Nielsen, it is shown that on-demand streaming rose 54% in 2014, Gans 2015. In a more recent study from Counterpoint Research, it was found that streaming subscriptions grew 32% year on year, reaching 358 million subscriptions in the calendar year of 2019, Kumar 2020. By the end of 2020, it is expected that paid subscriptions will grow more than 25% year on year to exceed 450 million, Kumar 2020. Over 80% of music streaming revenue came from paid subscriptions, whereas the rest came from advertisements and partnerships with brands and telcos, further indicating paid subscriptions is of prime importance for music streaming platforms. Kumar 2020. Music enthusiasts are now more than ever primarily listening to music through these free, ad-based, or subscription fee-served streaming platforms. How does this affect the listener? Well, in a positive light, it provides them with a vast catalog of music under one roof. However, once they log out of that specific streaming app or don't pay their service fee, they no longer have access to the music. Whereas if they buy the digital album, they can save those files to their device, which can then be transferred from device to device and so forth. The peculiar and abstract manipulation of information as a means of creating wealth is no longer a monopoly of the stockbroker. It is now shared by every engineer and by the entire communications industries. McLuhan, 1964, 467. This streaming environment is definitely creating a monopoly on the way in which we not only listen to, but also consume music. Conclusion. Streaming music has done what other technologies like vinyl, cassette tape, and compact disc have done to the genre of entertainment, but in a much different way. Participation has brought fans and artists closer together than ever. The research conducted has become greater than ever. Reach from listener to artist and artist to listener has even become more extensive than we've ever seen. What we have learned from completing this project is that streaming benefits several parties differently. The party that benefits the most is the actual streaming service, due to monetary gain as well as being the only satisfaction to a bona fide need from several other parties. Record labels also benefit quite extensively due to the audience reach provided and monetary gain from entire catalogs being placed on these streaming platforms. Listeners can find victory in the concept of having such vast libraries of music at their fingertips for little to no payment necessary. Furthermore, the convenience of where, when, and how one can access these streaming services is an added bonus. Artists benefit solely from the exposure and global audience they are able to reach with their music. The area in which artists do not benefit at all is that of income. Streaming is set up for the platform and record label to win monetarily. Therefore, while streaming has become a necessary tool for artists, it doesn't return much, if anything, to their bank accounts, thus making it a double-edged sword. The environment of streaming music requires more participation than any medium used for similar purposes to come before it. It requires more attention to detail regarding sound and production. The environment of streaming music even creates its own literal environment based on where you choose to utilize the medium. Streaming music is indeed a cool medium of low definition.